Good morning, everyone. I'm Edwin Davis with 3Cloud. I want to welcome you this morning to the introduction of the Azure automation. I apologize in advance. There are some audio difficulties. Hopefully you all can hear me well. And if so, I'm certain I'll be notified if you can't hear me. I will say, preface this, that I can't necessarily hear you as an audience. So if any questions, please put them in the chat, and hopefully the moderator will be able to raise them to me. So with that, this morning we're just going to take a look at Azure automation and things that you can do in your Azure environment to automate some of those tools and features that you use within the Azure environment. Number of different capabilities that you have to automate certain things, whether it be starting and stopping services, or doing administrative tasks such as indexing, scaling, things of that nature. There are really quite a number of different things that you can do from an Azure automation perspective. So those are the kind of things that we'll review. We'll take a look at what Runbooks are from a perspective of basically setting up automated scripts to be able to do tasks, and also within those Runbooks, being able to schedule and test your code and being able to see that those things ran. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring up a browser. We'll go ahead and look at the portal at portal.azure.com, and you'll be able to see how we go into Azure and set up some Azure automation and be able to do those Runbooks and set up automation, bring in modules that you may need to do other automation. Again, test those things, publish your Runbooks, as well as see the results of those. So I'll go ahead and bring up a browser window, and we'll go ahead and take a look at those items. All right, as you can see, what I've done is just go directly to portal.azure.com, and based off of my login in this test environment, you'll see that I have some Azure resources. So the first thing that we would want to do is go ahead and add an automation resource. So to be able to do that, your Azure.com environment would likely look different because you can always set it up to look anyway. But you'll see a grid that says all resources, and you can go ahead and also create a resource or add a resource. So if you clicked in and typed in automation, all right, that's a little slow. We'll blame that on Azure. There you go. All right, so the window refresh there, you're able to see automation pops up in the marketplace. So what you can do is go ahead and click on automation, and then when automation pops up, it gives you an opportunity to set up a an automation service per se in your Azure environment. So with that automation service, we'll go ahead and just say create, and then we'll go ahead and give it a name. We'll just call it Tuesday Automation. It's using my subscription. I have a test subscription. Go ahead and choose a resource group, and I have an existing development resource group. And of course, your location closest to where you are, and then go ahead and ensure that the create run as account, that's associating a runnable account that has access to be able to run this automation. So you'll want to make sure that says yes. And then go ahead and hit create. And this takes usually about a minute to initiate. And then you'll see that service spin up. And it says deployment succeeded. So that happens relatively quickly. And then what you'll see is, if I was to refresh this, you would then see that all those resources pop up. And we have a Tuesday automation. So once I refreshed it, you saw that it created a Runbook per se, but it also set up a automation account here at the bottom. You'll see it says automation account. So to be able to configure your automation routines and Runbooks per se, you'll want to go ahead and go into that automation account you just created as an Azure resource. So we'll go ahead and click on the one we just called Tuesday automation. And then the first thing you'll see is a splash screen that kind of shows any job statistics within here. And within this environment, what you'll also see is typical within an Azure environment, you'll have this menu pane that has resources that are typical to different Azure things. Of course, obviously, you can look at monitors, alerts, metrics, things of those nature. The items that we're going to be focused on today are essentially looking at your process automation. That's runbooks, jobs, and galleries. So that's what we're really concerned about, is how to set this up, how do they run, and then how do these things get scheduled, and then any modules that we would need to bring in. So with that, the first thing we'll go ahead and take a look at from a runbook perspective is we'll go ahead and click on Runbooks. So as you can see, once I clicked on within process, in your menu bar, you saw a section called Process Automation. So if I clicked on Runbooks here, you'll see that you got a couple of default or generic runbooks that they threw in. And again, runbook is just essentially a script or routine that can be automated to run or manage various tasks. So in this case, they gave you a couple of samples that were published. And within here, one of the methods of doing runbooks is you can do PowerShell, you can do Python. There's even what's called a graphical runbook. So these are examples of those. So from that, the biggest thing I would say from here is, again, very simplistic to get started and set up. Essentially, again, your resource automation account, name it, hit create, boom, you're in. Now you click on Runbooks, and here you are. One of the things that we'd like to point out right away is this gallery of Runbooks, because what's important here is if you browse up and click on gallery, you'll see that there's all types of Runbooks that you have access to immediately, things that you don't have to design from scratch. These templates already exist, so there's literally probably hundreds of them, and of course you can always create your own. So with that, if we clicked on Browse Gallery, we'll go ahead and click on Browse Gallery, and what you'll see is dozens, and you can sort these by popularity, types, things of that nature. So you can see there's all kinds of runbooks that do stuff. I mean, in any environment, there's going to shut down a VM, start an Azure VM, Azure inventory for PowerShell. So there are all kinds of indexing, updating. So there's all kinds of runbooks in this gallery. So one of the things that you can do that simplifies your setting up runbooks is just pick one. Obviously, there's things that you're going to be interested in. So you would say, well, I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to do an index. I want all kinds of stuff. Again, you can always code your own, and obviously there's going to be ones that you want to use in your environment. But the best place to start is one that's already done, so that you don't have to do a lot of this. And again, from a development and setup perspective, obviously some of these things take longer time to configure and set up than others. I'm just going to show you how to use them, how to import them, how to export them, and how to test them and schedule them and publish them. and that gets you going with it. And then you apply that same technique to any of these guys. So you have a full list of dozens of them. So let's just pick one and just go ahead and import it and do something really simple, like with all things from a demo perspective. Being that this is an introduction, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to do something really unsophisticated, but the technique, again, works for everything. So we'll go ahead and click on this one item called Hello World and just pull up what this runbook looks like. Boom, it looks like just a PowerShell script that really doesn't have anything in it. It just essentially has one command: write out hello or whatever you pass in, and they defined it as a parameter in PowerShell. So that's all that's in this runbook. It's really one line of code. So it's write output. But as you can see with that method, now all you need to do is let's see if I can zoom in a little bit and allow you to see that the runbook code. All right, so if that's helpful, hopefully that's a little bit more more clear to be able to see. So this runbook is essentially, again, one line of code. So that's really all that's in here. But in this case, we'll go ahead and hit import. That way you can see that from the gallery, you're able to just suck in a runbook. All right. And so with that, we'll just give it a name for today. I just prefixed it. And then it's a PowerShell workflow. And it's importing. All right. So we've literally just imported a runbook. And bear with me while I try and get the zoom to be a functional view of this. All right. All right, so we just imported it. So now if we go back as I went back a little too far. But back into our automation here, I'm gonna try and get this. So we just imported that runbook. So if I go to runbook, now you saw the runbook we just imported because we went to the gallery and said, there's hundreds of them. I just picked one to be able to import from the gallery. So again, there's going to be all types of things that you may want to do and automate and do, but that's how you would pick something that's already pre-baked. So in this case, if we go ahead and click on that runbook, we're now actually within a specific runbook. And being within the runbook, the main things that you'll want to do are certainly edit and test the runbook, and then of course publish it, and then be able to schedule it and run it. So we'll go ahead and walk through that with that. So here's our Tuesday Hello World runbook. We just imported it, and now we'll go ahead and take a look. So what we'll do is click on the edit, and then now within the edit, what you'll see is that runbook or whatever block of code that you intend to run. And again, this is just a .ps1 file that you could save in a text file, and you could write literally just one command or whatever command. So in this case, now within the runbook. So what I'll point out here is that, again, with any block of code, some of the things that you can do within here, I'm going to add a couple of lines, or you'll see this navigation pane to your left. And what you'll see here are additional cmmandlets. So again, this may be a simple block of code that just says write output hello and hello world. But this commandlet allows you to add this to your canvas. So you could conceivably have different commands that you want to run based off of how sophisticated your runbook is, or you may want to add different features. So these commandlets allow you to add to the canvas. So I added a couple of lines. So one example is if I was to click on the chevron I could actually browse different commands that I wanted to add depending upon the type of runbook I was running. But for instance, I'll just pick one and just service principal. So I'll just take this commandlet and just right click and say add to canvas, boom. So that would be the syntax to actually add a service principal. So you may be building a run book and it's asking you to add service principals, things of that nature. So we just, as you can see, just right clicking on it and saying add to canvas, boom, that block of code has just been drafted. So you don't actually have to go through the work of reinventing yourself because all of these commandlets are essentially here. So we'll go ahead and delete that for now, but I wanted to show you how you add things to Canvas. Obviously, you have run books as they would be added, and then you can do things, credentials, certificates, connections. So you can get very sophisticated in this environment, but we're going to take the simplistic approach, and certainly with all things, you'll expand on it and make it suit your environment. But that said, now that you have your code that you want to test, in this case, it's just a PowerShell script, we'll go ahead and hit the test pane. And then what that does is it actually brings up that PowerShell script. And then what you saw in that PowerShell, it had a parameter defined. So this is where you would put in the default. So I would type hello all in this as a parameter. Again, when you set this up in your environment, you're going to have parameters that gives a server name, a database name, and things of that nature. So this is just simply showing you that within your script, this is where it would test and show up. So now that you have it, if you click start, this thing queues up, it starts to run, and it's going to validate your script. It's going to literally tell you whether your script is runnable or not, or essentially test it for you. So obviously, if you had syntax errors, you have to fix it and just come back in here and run it. So we'll go ahead and hit start, and you'll see how quickly it queues up and starts to run. Certainly with anything, if you have services that are complex or that start up and queue in the background, they're going to take longer to run. So boom, there you have it. So hello all. So the script worked. It worked. It completed. But there's going to be ones that don't work. And this is where it's going to be very useful for you to debug those things. So that said, we know the parameters popped up. You're able to type it in here to the left, and then you were able to start it and run it, and it showed that it queued up and was completed. So that's the behavior you're going to go through to set up any of these run books that you're going to run and configure any of those and test them, because obviously until you test it, you're not certain that it's going to run. So we'll go ahead and say, boom, that was great. That ran fine, and it looked just like we wanted. Well, what you'll want to do then is you'll need the next, now that you've confirmed it and it tested fine, you need to now publish this run book so that it's usable in your environment. Once you publish this run book, what happens is it goes into your automation pane, so that you can now run a schedule to it and things of that nature. So we'll go ahead and say publish, yes, and it is published. So that was pretty quick. So now our run book was successfully published. So we'll navigate back, and then you'll see on this pane that Tuesday Write Hello World was now published. So we've actually published a run book. So now you can actually do the scheduling and look at the jobs and see the outcome and all that good stuff. So obviously that was a really simplistic example. Some of the ones that you may do in your environments will be slightly more complex than this, slightly more involved. Obviously, you're going to have much more code to deal with. So with that, I'm going to show you now where you can actually import a runbook. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and hit import a runbook, and this is more likely to be something you'll do in your environment. So with that, if you were to hit import a runbook, you'd browse to a file, something that you want to run or automate in your environment. So with that, we'll go ahead and select a file. And in this case, we'll take a runbook that is going to process. You'll go ahead and process this. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and upload a runbook here. All right. And then we'll go ahead and hit create. So we're now importing this runbook. And in this case, this runbook is to process a analysis services database. So as you can see, there's a little bit more code involved. Certainly, again, some runbooks are going to be more complex than others, but this shows you how you can go out and grab a block of code that you may have had already developed. So in this case, it defined a couple of parameters. In our hello world, we only had one parameter. So in this case, you have 3 parameters. So you have your database name, the name of your server, also the refresh type. So you have that already. So you'll know once you test this, you're going to see 3 parameters, and it's going to expect you to put that information in here. Also, if you had a credential, in this case, a login credential was set up, called a service principal. So in this case, that was the name that's being used. And then same thing with the commands on these commandlets. In this case, this block of commandlets is checking for a database name, a refresh, a server, what your credentials and your reference to that variable. So that's what's set up in this module. But the biggest thing you'll want to do is, obviously, with anything, is test it. So again, go back into the testing pane. And now what you saw is those 3 parameters. Here they are to your left. The database name, you have to give it my database, your server name, obviously my server, and then your refresh type, in this case, would be full. And you're going to say, that's probably not going to run, but I'm going to test it. Well, you're going to find out. So we go ahead and hit the start, because you have your block of code. It's already coded. Now you have to test it. Will this thing work? So now we click on start, and we're going to see if this thing's going to actually work. And I'll go ahead and spoiler alert, this will not work, because this is just a demo, and I actually don't have those services running in the background. However, the point to this is to be able to show you that it obviously worked on the hello world, but in this case, it's actually giving you feedback on what does not work. So you have a script, and then you have all these parameters, and it's going to tell you, I just ran it. I tried to test it, and look, basically, there's no database, there's no service, it can't find all of this stuff. So it's actually trying to run your script and test it for you. So that said, what we learned from this process is, yeah, you were able to import it, you were able to run the parameters and actually test it and run it, but because none of this is actually running in the real environment, you can't do it. So in this case, this actually doesn't work, which is fine, but this is the type of detailed feedback you'll need in your environment to be able to test your scripts that you're automating. But in this case, we'll go ahead and close it. But now, for the sake of argument, saying that, well, great, and then obviously just with the similar to the hello world, we would just simply hit publish, and then we would publish this runbook. So in this case, this one's got 3 parameters, it's got some credentials, and it's got a command to invoke the processing. Well, this one isn't a start stop, but this one is to invoke the processing of a database. So again, many things that you can automate. So that's that runbook. Now that this runbook is configured and you tested it and it said, okay, it was great, you hit publish, boom. Now, once you walk back, you would see a published runbook. So in this case, our Tuesday Hello World was published, which is awesome. So now you'd say, okay, well, well, how do I get it scheduled and how do I run it? And then how do I know it ran? So, well, you click on your Runbook that you published and tested. You'll come back in here. You'll say, okay, well, what do I need to do now? Now that you're in that Runbook, you need to go ahead and link it to a schedule. So you click on link to schedule, and then you set up the schedule. So you come in here, you click schedule, then you create a new schedule. In this case, you give it a name, and then you give it a time minimum. I believe it has to be at least 5 minutes out. So I have 11:36 Eastern or 11:37. So we'll go ahead and say 11:43 a.m. All right. And we'll run it once and say create. So now we expect the schedule to be created. If you had any parameters and you wanted to put in something like hello, you could have put hello. Obviously, in the example we showed, we had a server name, a database name, and a processing type. So, all right. So that's now, so now that that Runbook, we expect, we can look at that schedule and we can see that this schedule, this next runtime, is scheduled to run at 11:43, which is 5 minutes, 5 minutes from now. So if you refresh that, it would queue up as if it was getting ready to schedule to run. So the takeaway there is that you're now able to take a runbook that you tested, you then publish that runbook, and then subsequently you clicked on the runbook and clicked link to schedule. And then now you went to the, you browsed to the left in your menu pane on your resources, and you clicked on the schedule and you're able to see that it's scheduled. So the next thing you expect to see in this schedule is that it would go from next run to queued up. So it would be queued up and ready to run. And once it ran, you would actually see that the output would show that in your job, it would show up here that it ran and what its status was. And you would actually be able to see what the progress of that runbook was. So while that's queuing up, we'll go ahead and give it a couple of minutes here. So we'll let that, and we'll go ahead and try and do something similar to, you know, what a cooking show would look like. You know, while that lasagna is baking, we won't wait 45 minutes, but we'll see what it looks like when it's done. So let's go in and look at one that's already done, and we'll go ahead and say, how did that job go? So if we go back in our jobs, we'll say, oh, it was completed. Look at that, hello world. And you click on that hello world, and you'll be able to see it. Look, it ran the value, and then you're able to see, oh, what was the output? It just said hello, and then it gave the test. Were there any errors? Were there any warnings? Look at the logs, the exceptions. So you're able to see everything that happened to that job. And then, of course, you can even do starts and stops on jobs that are in progress. You're able to go back into your breadcrumbs here and look at that. So you're able to see your jobs. You're able to go back to a specific runbook, and then that's essentially what you would see in that job and whether it ran or not. Again, ours is certainly on Tuesday, but that lasagna is still baking. So I wanted to show you what that behavior was. The next interesting piece I'd like to share with you while that's running is dealing with modules and what that's about. So what you'll find is some of these runbooks that we saw, they were more, some could have been more involved than others. And as you saw, there are things that in your navigation pane on the left in a specific runbook, you're able to see, and we'll go back to our Tuesday test for now. I'll kind of just open up that Runbook and just show you that. We'll go ahead and say, we'll go ahead and navigate. Actually, we're going to come back into our automation, but what I want to show you are what's called modules. What modules are that within a given Runbook, there may be certain tasks or commands you may want to run with your Runbook that require additional libraries to be run underneath to give you the functionality to run certain code in your environment. So in this case, if we were to look at our Runbook and we were edit and we came back in here, these commands, you say, oh, I can run any of these commands. Yes and no, because just because you add it to the canvas doesn't mean it's going to run. So what you would need to do if you were adding something to the canvas, I'll give you an example. Azure resources. So let's say you wanted to run one of these commands. Some of these things require code that's not loaded on your system or your environment to run. So just because you write add to canvas, you say, oh, this command will run now, I'll test it, it's not going to run. Because a lot of times you'll add a command, as soon as you test, you'll find that it's going to say you're missing libraries to be able to run this. So in this case, you're like, well, how do I run those libraries? Okay, so the first thing you do is you click on modules. You come into here to modules, and let's say it said, your error was you didn't have a module to be able to run that Runbook. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and import a module that was missing. Let's say you're missing AZ accounts. So by clicking on modules, you're able to go in this menu here and add that so that your Runbook would run. So let's look AZ. All right, let's search for this thing. That's a was. Let's do this. Let's modules gallery, and let's go for AZ. All right, AZ accounts. Let's say that module is missing. How do I import it? Okay, so we know it told us, you might be running some super sophisticated code and it told you you're missing something or that you had to have it to run it. So I click on it. Oh, here's this module. Look at that. How do I get it in my environment? Just hit import. That's it. Just import it. And now it's part of your environment. Here's the catch. Some of these are going to take a while. Some of these require additional modules. So this is an easy one, AZ accounts. We click on import. It's going to import really fast, but there's going to be ones that may take several minutes to load in your environment. Or it may say, I got to load this one and 3 others as well, which is fine, but you need to know how to import it. So you go ahead and click import. And then you say, okay. And it's important, look at that. That was a fast one. So AZ accounts is now imported in our modules. So now you see AZ account. Look, it's current time, 11:44 a.m. Eastern. I just imported. Well, it actually says it's still importing. Look at the status. So it's not quite imported yet, but we're going to let it run in the background. So that's how you would add a module. So sometimes, again, certain things that you run, a little bit of complexity, it may take a few minutes to import, but that's all it is. Browse for the module you want, click on import, boom, it's importing. And eventually, once you refresh, it'll show available. See, so these modules have already been imported in my environment. They're all available. And again, just depending upon your Runbook, some are going to have more complexity than others. There's going to be things that you'll want to, that would be necessary to run your scripts or your background. Boom. That only took maybe, a minute and a half, and now it's available. So we just imported that module. So that module is now in. You're able to see your Runbooks. Let's check out our jobs. So let's go to our job. Look, our job ran. It says it completed. So Let's click on it and see. Okay, we typed hello, and there you go. There are no errors, no warnings, no exceptions. All right, so the good news is we scheduled it, it ran, and the output was simply hello. Um, so that module was successfully scheduled, run, and then I'm sorry, that Runbook was successfully ran. And then one of the things you can also is go back into your schedule and then change that schedule if you want it. You could delete it. You can make it recurring. Uh, those are some of the options you can do. So with that, I wanted the biggest takeaway I wanted to show you was that there's an unlimited number of possibilities here in terms of Runbooks. It looked really simplistic. We ran through it here really quickly in about a half hour, 35 minutes here. But the takeaway was you're able to see that you can just click on automation, set up an automation, hit create, click on a run book, import a run book, browse a gallery just to see what the gallery was. Once you're inside that run book, be able to get in and edit it and add commands if you need to add commands, test it, and actually run your parameters, and then publish it once it was successful. You published it, and then you're able to check the schedule, run the job, see what the output of that job was. So that's essentially what's involved in automation. Again, this may seem very elementary from a functionality standpoint, but I'm sure certain folks are already seeing that there's unlimited possibilities in terms of things you'll want to automate. You may want to schedule start your Azure services. Certain services cost when they're online. So certain things like starting and stopping a SQL data warehouse environment and turning it offline in a dev environment is something that you may want to do. Or starting the Azure analysis services, start and stop. Again, all of those are essentially just those are just run books that you can import and modify or just build your own. So that's what we wanted to cover today. I know we kind of went through it really fast, but this is essentially what's involved.
Hey everybody, thanks for being so patient. Edwin's just trying to access some of you guys' questions. I just wanted to jump back in really quickly just to let you guys know what's going on. He's just trying to answer some of the questions, and since he can't hear me, it makes it a little bit more difficult for me to just go ahead and read them off. So just bear with us for a second and just keep submitting your questions while we wait on him to start going through.
All right, I'm gonna see here if I got. Okay, someone asked in the questions, does this automation only interact with Azure? How to get on-prem interaction? So essentially, yes, this is primarily only for Azure, but in the context of on-prem and using this, one of the things I would say is if you've configured your on-prem data to be consumed in Azure, then you can automate those Azure resources that are already connecting and making a connection and pulling in that in those resources. No, you wouldn't be able to do things like database things such as SQL agent, where on-prem you would schedule an indexing job. So you wouldn't be able to do that with an on-prem SQL Server database. If you had that database and that data already sucked into Azure, and your connection or your ADF packages are doing that, sure, then your automations would work for that. So I hope that answers that question. Let me see if there's some others here. Okay. And then as far as the modules and keeping them updated, someone asked, again, your modules are going to be for your environment, and they're going to show that they've already been updated. Microsoft is obviously managing some of those in terms of the latest modules. If they come out, you may need to refresh if there's a new module, a new functionality that you need to have. So you would need to refresh that as needed. But for the most part, that's pretty much autopilot behind the scenes. So with all things Azure, you don't apply patches and things of that nature. So many of those things are going to be kept routine and updated in the background. But if there's functionality that you don't have, you're going to have to import that. But with all things Azure, you don't apply patches. That's all handled by Microsoft. And then someone asked a question about using SSIS packages in automation. With that, that's essentially tools using ADF, and then actually using an integration runtime to be able to run SSIS packages dealing with ADF. But for the most part, depending upon your requirement, you may have to do a runtime to be able to run those sys packages. And then with that, there are going to be certain automation features that you can do, but absolutely, some of those are going to be limited. But certainly, you know, I would argue that ADF is where you want to go, and then automate any of your existing pipelines or ADF processes. So hopefully that answers that question. But and let's see. And then whether or not automation can be done from a ADF or .NET, I won't necessarily say I can speak to that, but there are logic apps that you can run. And within those logic apps, those are also workflows and automation that you can set up. So I would say more than likely it's going to be a logic app or automation from that feature. I saw a question about the Runbook status and changing that from failed. I can't say I know the answer to that question, so that's something I would have to research. I'm sorry, I wouldn't know that one. And with anything, there's definitely certain things that you can connect and configure and write to tasks that write. So yes, you can definitely automate logging and things of that nature. Again, you may have to use a combination of tools and not necessarily everything in a runbook, but there's certainly tasks and ways that you can write output of some of your Azure features to storage accounts and things of that nature. Absolutely. And then with some of the authentication, as with things with Azure, it's really going to be very environment specific. So unfortunately, yeah, that's one of the challenges with Azure sometimes in terms of sometimes your authentication and getting those things worked out. Some of those, oftentimes, they may seem like extreme roadblocks, but in the end, it's likely a switch or a setting that just wasn't checked off. You would have to debug it. I don't have a quick answer for that. It's just that oftentimes the solution will be simple, but the time it takes to get to the solution could be very intense and take up a lot of time. You spend a lot of cycles trying to get through some of those initial setup and permissions issues. And And I hope I got your questions answered. There may be one or two that I missed, and if so, I apologize that I didn't necessarily get all questions answered. But with that, I think today gave you a good intro to the possibilities of the Runbooks and how quick and easy they are to just set up, configure, and debug, and import and export as necessary. But with that, I appreciate everyone's time today, and I hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Edwin, so much for hosting. And as usual, guys, you guys will receive the recording tomorrow in your inbox around noon Eastern Standard Time. So please look out for that. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Edwin or myself. We'll be happy to help you guys. As well as please look forward to any of our future webinars. We thank you guys so much for attending, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your Tuesday. Thank you guys so much. Bye-bye.